coming up on The Chaos Effect.
It began really early for me. I was right around Mike's age. I was 3 or 4 years old.
Makes its way to the top of the tree line from the back of the yard and floats over and kind of parks itself next to this big tree my grandmother used to have at the end of the driveway.
I'm picking up a heavy, creepy vibe here.
You ever have the suspicion that you've been abducted by aliens?
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
And you're listening to The Chaos Effect.
And you're listening to The Chaos Effect.
And you're listening to The Chaos Effect.
You're listening to The Chaos Effect.
You have chosen wisely.
Welcome to The Chaos Effect. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you may be listening. I am your host, Ryan Knights. We are coming to you from the deepest, darkest, smallest little back room in the nocturnal void. And please, before we get on with meeting our guests and the show itself, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. And now on with the show. My guests tonight are Mike Stevens and Nomar Slevik. Mike is a born and bred New Hampshire native and is the founder of granitesky.org, a paranormal investigator and outdoorsman. Mike has lived a life of UFO visitation and abduction from a very early age. He uses Granite Sky's services to help those who've experienced the same phenomena in coming to terms with what they have witnessed and the depression and anxiety that comes along with it, to help them know they are not alone. Nomar is a fellow Maina, independent author, documentary filmmaker, musician, and podcaster. His newest book, Granite Skies, A Disconcerted Journey Through the Unknown, highlights Mike's experiences and the human element in dealing with these extraordinary circumstances. He is also the author of Otherworldly Encounters and UFOs Over Maine. His documentary, Otherworldly and More, is currently streaming on Amazon. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time.
Ryan, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks. We're glad to be here.
Before we get things rolling, gentlemen, you get the first-time guest disclaimer, and that is, it's just the three of us sitting in my Ford Fusion on our way to go for a skywatch. Wherever the road leads, it leads. Wherever it ends, but we'll be friends. See? That wasn't so bad, now was it?
That wasn't bad at all, thank you.
The best way to start this off with that little bit of an introduction, how did you guys actually meet up? Was the basis of you guys coming together, to write the book and kind of go from there, I guess?
Sure. It goes back a few years. I started frequenting a center that Mike volunteered his time at called the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies. I went down there for a few presentations and screened some documentaries. And through our interactions, I got to know Mike a little bit. He certainly became a good acquaintance. And as we got to know each other more, we certainly turned into friends. And through those sporadic visits and interactions, I started to learn a little bit about Mike's experiences. Definitely not in total, but I heard some stuff here and there, some from Mike, some from other people that Mike knows. And I always found it really, really interesting. So about 2.5 years ago, Mike and I were chatting on the phone, and he really got into all of his experiences. I'm sure I was bugging him and being like, all right, and then what happened, and then what happened? But I really got a full-scale version of a lot of the experiences that he's had throughout his entire life, starting at, 3 or 4 years old. And after I had heard, 10, 12, 15 stories. As a content creator, I really got that spark in my head that, boy, I need to tell Mike's story. This is amazing. And with the scope of his story, a book made a whole lot of sense to me. So I brought it up to Mike, and he was definitely interested in the idea. He had actually played around with it a little bit himself prior to us attempting to work together. So I think it'd been on his mind a little bit. And that was really the catalyst. That one phone call was the catalyst for us eventually having some long-form interviews and finally getting this stuff down on paper.
Interesting. I do have a question, Mike. And it might be a stupid question, but how difficult was it for you to actually open up to Nomar?
It was actually very easy. There's something about Nomar that, he didn't ask the questions in a wrong way. He asked them because he was generally interested. And, I didn't know at the time, but Nomar's seen some stuff too. And, there was that inner, unspoken, he doesn't call himself an experiencer, but experiencer connection that we kind of made. And it was like, no, I knew I could trust him right from the start.
Nice. Now, could you go into a little bit about Granite Sky? I guess we kind of have the idea of what maybe pushed you to actually create Granite Sky to help people out, but what was kind of like that driving force? What kind of helped bring you out of your shell a little bit, I guess?
It was because I had been through it and I didn't have anybody to talk to myself, and I didn't want anybody else to have to experience that. But it wasn't, this overnight thing. I'd started roughly 2011 just doing open topic monthly groups to just talk about anything UFOs, not necessarily experiencers. I formed a predecessor to Granite Sky called Seacoast Saucers with two individuals who were really close to me, and we were, we started to, focus more in on the subject of just UFOs, the encounters. Some was social, some was, the experiencer stuff, but I wanted to really focus on the experiencer stuff, so I ended up stepping away from that group and forming Granite Sky. So, it wasn't, the reason's fairly simple. It's like, yes, because it happened to me, but the process, actually unfolded over several years as I kind of fine-tuned, what I actually wanted to do with it.
I really like the mission statement behind Granite Sky, that you worry about people first. You don't really get a whole lot of that nowadays. Do you have a lot of people that call you kind of regularly, or, has it been kind of slow going a little bit?
So normally before this whole COVID mess, we had monthly meetings or right up until March, and we were doing 4 meetings a month. Each had a different spin. Some were general discussions, some were just for experiencers, some were to play with some of the C5 stuff and meditation. We do a movie night that was alien themed to see what Hollywood got right and what they got wrong. So, we tried to do something that everybody could get a hold of. But it was fairly local people, and it was, there'd be nights we'd have 25, 30 people in the room easily. But now that we put the book out and stuff, I'm starting to get a lot more email-type clients who were like, oh, we heard you on this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, the next meeting's so-and-so. And I'm in Texas. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. So I'm starting to take on more clients from a broader perspective now.
Nice. That's fantastic. Nomar,
yeah,
you've had quite a few experiences yourself, I would imagine. Where has your experiences ranged? Have they been more of the otherworldly nature, maybe paranormal, that type of thing, that kind of helped get you on the path that you're on now?
Well, I would definitely categorize it all as otherworldly. I like to look at these encounters not through a lens and just to look at them for what they are. And by doing so, I'm hoping I don't get pigeonholed into thinking, oh, this is a ghost and that was a creature, so that means it's cryptozoology, and then this was a light in the sky, so that's extraterrestrial. So I think otherworldly is a really good word to use, and that's why I've kind of latched onto it creatively with some of my titles. But it began really early for me. I was right around Mike's age. I was 3 or 4 years old. I was living in Fort Kent, Maine. That's where I'm from originally. We moved away from there when I was really young, so it was just like a year later after my sighting that we moved away. But I was laying in bed one night, and this loud bang woke me up. And I didn't know what it was, and I was scared, and I didn't know what was going on, so I was just kind of, my eyes are just kind of darting around a room trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. And then I could see the sky lighting up, like from lightning. And then I could hear little spatters of rain on the window, and I was like, oh, it's a thunder and lightning storm. So I kneeled up on the bed and looked out the window, and I was seeing lightning strikes, and I was hearing booms. But after a moment, there was this jagged yellow, really like obscene lightning bolt that got stuck in a cloud. And at least that's the way my 3 or 4 year old mind saw it. I can't see it. I can't remember it any other way. But if I were to ask you to draw a lightning bolt, you draw this jagged yellow line, and that's what I saw stuck in a cloud. And there was electricity coming off of it, and there was booms happening. And then I really don't know what happened. I just kind of fell back asleep, I guess. I woke up the next morning, and the lightning bolt was still there when I looked out the window. And so I ran downstairs to get my dad, brought him upstairs so I could show him, and it was gone. And I was trying to explain to him about a lightning bolt being stuck in a cloud, and he was just kind of doing the adult thing, like, yeah. And I'm like, I must have been really insistent, though, because he kind of had to, like, kneel down, get on my level, and was like, listen, it didn't even rain last night. Like, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but there's nothing out there. There was no storm. Nothing's in the clouds. But that was, like, the first time I remember something really strange happening. Now, like 2, 3, 4 weeks later, I'm being woken up in the middle of the night by my family. They're bringing me and my sister downstairs, and they said that the northern lights were showing themselves outside, and we're going to go out and look. So they bundled me all up, and my dad takes me outside, and I look up at the sky, and sure enough, there's these crazy ribbons of light. And it's the only time I've ever seen them. And so those two things happening at such a young age told me that, strange stuff happens in the sky, and I should probably pay attention. So 3 or 4 years old, that was my catalyst for looking up and just paying attention to anything out of the ordinary.
Wow. It's funny because I actually never saw the Northern Lights until I turned 28. So
oh, wow.
You kind of got a leg up on me on that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen him since though. I mean, I'm except for pictures or video, but yeah, it was quite the thing to see.
Mike, would you be willing to kind of take us through where this all started for you?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely willing. Where it all starts is kind of a little bit of the conundrum, which was, one of the tasks Nomar had to face, like, how do you tell a story that has no beginning and no end? But he did an excellent job. So the first time I remember anything happening like this, I was like 3.5, 4 years old. I don't exactly know. But there's some indication that, we kind of figured out afterwards that this probably started in infancy. But the first time I remember, my standing memory, I was about 3.5. We're at my grandmother's house in Southampton, New Hampshire. There's some type of family function going on, like maybe somebody's birthday or something, because there was extended family there, aunts, uncles, cousins, that sort of thing. And the way my grandmother's house is set up, you come in through the kitchen, and, and off the kitchen was the dining room. You had to go through the dining room to get anywhere else in the house. And off that dining room was like a 3-season porch that overlooked the backyard. And when I walked through that dining room and kind of past that three-season porch in the backyard, I had this immense, like, internal calling that I had to get outside. I don't remember how I got outside, but I found myself standing in the driveway with my cousin, who's only a few months older than I am. So this situation right here, to begin with, is bizarre because we were watched like hawks. The chances that one of us would have got outside probably wouldn't have happened. The fact that two of us did, there's no way. So anyways, me and my cousin were standing out in the driveway. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know why we're there. And we see the woods behind my grandmother's house start glowing. Like there's this red glow, and all you can see is the shadow of the trees. Eventually, this craft makes its way to the top of the tree line from the back of the yard and floats over and kind of parks itself next to this big tree my grandmother used to have at the end of the driveway. And it looked like your atypical or stereotypical, flying saucer, kind of domed at the top, domed at the bottom, wider in the middle type thing, some type of metallic, almost glow to it, and had this center row of lights that was strobing around it, and the light pattern, it didn't seem like individual bulbs like we'd have on our sign. It seemed almost more fluid, and they were just kind of doing this soft, like white type, just strobing pattern around them. And all of a sudden, that bar of lights, the intensity and the pattern on it changed. It started getting more flashy as compared to like rolling, and the colors intensified into reds and oranges and this sort of thing. And as that happened, almost like when you open your car door at night, some type of interior light came on in this craft, which revealed a row of windows above this light bar. And in that row of windows, we could make out nothing in great detail, but a very humanoid, shadow of shoulders and a head. My standing memory was looking at that, and then there was a big blank. And the next thing I remember, this object was at the other end of the driveway by the street, hovering above a telephone pole. It sat there for, a few 30 seconds or something, and then just shot off into space and like disappeared into the blink of an eye. And that was kind of the catalyst for all this for me.
Wow. I can kind of relate in one part of that opening of that story of yours where you had your cousin with you. I'm wondering myself, did you guys ever kind of connect with each other at a later date and talk about something like that? The reason why I ask is because I had this really strange encounter with a friend of mine. It was a close encounter. It wasn't anything to do with UFOs or anything like that. But I'll ask him, and this happened many, many years ago, and I'll ask him even now, every now and then, hey, do you remember? He's like, no, I don't. He's like completely shut it out, doesn't want anything to do with it, and I can completely understand where he's coming from. But I'm just kind of wondering, did you and your cousin ever kind of connect later and talk about that?
In any earnest, we're probably about 25-ish the first time we did. We'd always grown up with the surface conversation. Even family members would would here and there be like, oh, they saw a UFO. But we'd be like, hey, you remember the UFO we saw? Yeah, and leave it like that was the end of it. We didn't really ever discuss it. So about 25-ish, I was just starting to kind of get a grasp of all this for myself, trying to figure out whether this is real, if I was crazy, and all this stuff. So I reached out to her and said, can you tell me what you remember? And then I'll tell you what I remember type thing. And she started telling me something else, and I remembered it as soon as she started telling me, but I had forgotten about it previously. We were again at my grandmother's house. She had this big farmer's porch that wrapped like around the front side by the driveway and around the back corner a little bit. And we were sitting out on there, and the not across the street neighbor, but the house next to them had a big lawn in the back, so it was fairly open. And above that, this just red light came in the sky and started just making maneuvers a plane wouldn't like figure eights and that sort of thing. And so when she told me that, I remembered it once she started telling me. I think we're like 8 or 9, maybe even as old as 12 when that happened, not, the young memory. And then when I told her what I remembered, she believed me, but she didn't have any memory of it. But so we have 2 encounters at my grandmother's house, but we don't, it's not we disagree, but we can't put something solid down on the age is kind of the issue.
Wow. The biggest thing that I'm thinking is that you had said that around the age of 25, you had really kind of started to try to, how do you wrap your mind around something like that? I mean, I'm just curious as to, how were you feeling? What were you thinking? Kind of like I'm not asking for your most innermost thoughts, but it's kind of like, how were you able to really kind of come to terms with something like that, considering where you really didn't have anybody to talk to and you were kind of felt like you were alone on that one?
Well, I mean, up until about school age, you're too young to know anybody any better. You kind of think this is happening to everybody. And then you start getting into school age and you realize, oh, nobody else is talking about this. Like, this probably hasn't been a part of anybody else's life. And, by that school age, I had already developed a couple severe phobias, social anxieties. Like if I was in the car at night, it's pretty rural out here, pretty rural where you are too, especially, rolling back the calendars. And then, like, if we passed under a street light and they weren't, like, on every block like they are now, like, I would freak out. I would actually have to turn around in the car, because if I saw the light going, I was okay. But if I saw the light coming at me, I'd freak out. But 3rd grade, I remember wetting myself in a classroom because I was so scared to make myself known, to like raise my hand and ask to go to the bathroom. Like, so there was all this weird stuff that wasn't UFO stuff, but my mind was already, like, I hate to say broken, but in a way, already shaping into this, like, all right, I just need to hide and shelter within myself. But so eventually you have the memories, and you get to that age around 20, and life kind of, or teenager, and life kind of takes a different thing. It's like, yeah, it's happening, but you're not really thinking about it. You're, when's the next party, school dance, this sort of thing. And by 25, you're starting to you still don't know everything you should, but you're starting to settle down to become a real adult. And, I was starting to look back into this stuff, and mostly because I was pretty much losing my mind, or wasn't sure if I was losing my mind at that point. Because I was trying to research it again. I was digging up more memories, and it was a mess. How I made it through, I don't know. Probably the only reason was because I had kids, and I knew I had to pull myself up to my bootstraps, whether I was crazy or not. But I knew I just couldn't not be present at that age, I guess.
It's amazing how kids can save you when you really, really need them, and they don't even know it. It's wow. I do have it's kind of a question for both of you guys. Have you guys ever actually gone out, like say on a night watch or up on a mountain together and maybe experienced something? Or is that ever something that would ever be in the plans if you haven't?
We have not, but yeah, I'd totally be down for something like that.
Because that would be...
Yeah, we don't really live that close. Like, last time we met up in person, we both had to drive 2 hours to meet in the middle, so...
Yeah, that's a little bit of a haul. That's kind of like from, where I am to Bangor, kind of something like that. You've had, I'm sorry, Mike, this kind of goes deeper for you though, doesn't it? Because you've kind of really experienced a lot of things that have a lot of people probably couldn't really even fathom, like dealing with other beings and that type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, Nomar, he's kind of done this for other documentaries and, other books and stuff. Yeah, he can probably answer this pretty good. There's some traits that are fairly common among most cases, but there's a lot of extra stuff in there, and I'll let Nomar take this away.
Please do.
Yeah, there's tons of common threads within other experiencers, and that can be from descriptions of the entities or beings themselves to similarities in the way a light or the shape of a craft looks. So there can be a lot of similarities, but within those similarities, that's where, as a researcher and as a content creator, that's where I get really excited, is getting into the minutia of this detail to see what's really happening, not only with the experience or the encounter itself, but what's happening with the experiencer too in their normal life. They don't stop being experiencers when they go to work or have to be a parent. It's happening all the time. They're always inside their head, and it's always top of mind. It's very rare where it's on the back burner. So in Mike's case in particular, when it comes to commonalities for other experiencers, sure, there are some. He's seen some beings that could be described as gray aliens. He certainly has seen lights in the sky. He's had some animal screen memory type things, similar to when people see owls and things like that. But Mike has had a plethora of very odd encounters as well. He's seen these troll-like beings, and they had spade shovels. He saw a hologram image of this alien face in his bedroom window. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So when I started diving into the details of Mike's encounter, I was just blown away by the types of encounters that he had. But then, just running parallel with that, is what this was doing to his mental health. And that, for me, and it turned out for Mike, because this process really got interesting for us, that got just as interesting, and maybe not interesting is the best word. It filled just as much or more space as the weird encounters did. I'm a very big advocate of normalizing the discussion of mental health. And that's everything from anxiety, depression, all the way to suicide. And if we can normalize those discussions, then people that suffer with those issues will feel more comfortable to talk about them, and then hopefully not self-harm or not just suffer in silence like Mike did for a lot of his life. And I too am someone who suffers from mental health issues, and I have issues with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. It runs the gamut. So when Mike and I really got into the meat of his encounters and the meat of his emotional state through a lot of this, we sort of formed this weird bond, like this weirdo bond. And we were always acquaintances. Love the guy. He's very, just fun to be around, really easy to be around, easy to talk to. But I wouldn't even describe us as like the best of friends. We're not calling each other every day and be like, hey, buddy. We just have this deep-rooted connection after having these pretty intense conversations. They happened over, 2 different time periods, I think over 2 different years. One was in 2018 and one in 2019, or maybe 2019 and beginning of 2020. Anyway. But they were very long form, and they were like 4 hours each. It got emotional. You had to take breaks. I would get caught up in the details of what Mike was telling me, and then I would start daydreaming or pretend that it's like a movie running in my head, and I would take Mike's place, and I was seeing what he was seeing. It was just all very intense. I know that kind of went beyond the scope of your question, but I hope it kind of puts some of the context of why this book is so important to us.
Well, I mean, that was like the best answer I could ever ask for. I mean, in all honesty, that was great. Sure. As a comment, I can say that in a way I can relate as far as the anxiety and the depression. My wife suffers from anxiety and depression, and it was because of an experience that she had some years ago that was very, very traumatic. And so I'm on board with what you're saying and how you guys would be feeling, because I deal with it every single day with her, and just trying to be a support for her is difficult enough, never mind trying to have a handle on something like that. That's tough. Troll-like creatures. Wow. With something like that, it almost sounds like it would be Fae, almost, if you understand where I'm coming from with that. I want people to get the book. I want to go deep, but not so deep, because there's definitely a lot of information there, and I think getting the book, you're going to get so much more out of it than however long of a conversation that we're going to have. But I was wondering, for me personally, in looking at, say, the paranormal, UFOs, aliens, all these cryptids, all these different subjects, has the thought ever come to you guys that maybe in some way a lot of these subjects could be connected in a way that we're not quite seeing?
I think for my quick answer, it is a resounding yes. But Mike has some pretty good insight on it.
Well, apparently I do. I think they're totally overlapped in a lot of ways. We're the ones who put it into the categories. If somebody's seen a UFO and then something happens, we go, oh, it's UFO related. Nobody's seen a UFO, we go, oh, it's paranormal, or, all this weird stuff. But if we just look at what it is, like, for example, all right, you start seeing shadows around your room, your keys, your glasses, whatever it is, they start moving around and hidden and stuff. Well, if you've never seen a UFO, it sounds very paranormal. But when you start dealing with experiencers, that is so very common. And then you start getting into the Bigfoot stuff, which, you think shouldn't be related to any of this. Not only are Bigfoot being sighted like the same days in the same areas that people are reporting UFOs, Ronnie LeBlanc, he's out of Leominster, Mass, does a great job of demonstrating the orange orbs, which are present in Bigfoot cases and UFO cases. And we know orbs are a huge part of, the paranormal stuff. So, yeah, I think there's an overlap that we just don't understand. We're the ones who break it up, not them being like, oh, this is it,
Yeah, I totally get that, because when Nomar mentioned the troll-like creatures, from the way that you described them, it almost sounded kind of like, if you look at the Fae, the actual same kind of story that seems to come up a lot is that they're from another place and they just kind of show up, and with something like portals. I've done a lot of reading into it, and I'm almost kind of blanking, but I guess I don't want to overgeneralize, but it almost seems to me like one of the bigger questions that I had heard as far as the UFO question was, are these visitors from another place, as far as universal, or from another dimension? And that almost kind of fits something like where the Fae would be. When saying, as far as classifications go, I think maybe a lot of ghost encounters could also maybe be considered extraterrestrial in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some of the commonalities we were talking about with experiencers earlier, a lot of people see gray-like beings, things like that. Some of the other commonalities is that experiencers have paranormal, or what people would deem a haunting type experience in and around their extraterrestrial sightings. And so does that mean that, oh my goodness, my house is haunted and I'm seeing UFOs? Or is all of this connected, and whatever is inside or causing the visualization of a UFO, is that also the shadow in the house, or the bumps in the night, or things like that? And I really think it makes it more clear that it's all interrelated, and it's all part of some more common phenomenon that we just haven't named yet, but I think there's a really good I think there's a good basis for it all being interconnected somehow, you know?
Yes, definitely. There was a couple things that I wanted to talk with you about, Nomar. One of them was you had like a cryptid sighting, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
may have something for that. If you wouldn't mind kind of going in and describing that a little bit, I think I might have something for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. So it was actually earlier this year. I've had experiences in the quote hunting world, and I've obviously have had a lot of experiences in the extraterrestrial world, but I haven't seen a lot of, you know, beings or creatures or things like that. Something did happen quite a few years ago, but this recent sighting was in February of this year, so it was pre-COVID, and you know, which feels like 1,000 years ago now. But I was driving home, and I was probably 4 miles from my house, and it was 6 o'clock at night. I was going about 45 miles per hour. And very rural area, so it's just the road and forest on either side, and some houses interspersed. And while I'm driving about 100 yards in front of me on the left side of the road, I saw this 5 or 6 foot tall, all black creature, and it kind of looked like a really rugged stick creature, you know, and almost like it had an exoskeleton, or like there was tar or something on it, and it was shiny, like it shined when my headlights hit it. And I only saw it for a few seconds but I watched it step into the woods. So when I reached the area that I thought it had walked into, I stopped my car and rolled down the window. Again, rural road. I had no worries about a car coming up, you know, behind me or in front of me or anything. So I'm just stopped right in the middle of the road, rolled down my window, and I'm trying to listen to see if I can hear something walking out there, or if I can, you know, figure out what it was. And after like just a second or so, this strong, like sulfur type smell just enveloped the car, and I was like, oh god. And of course, being the researcher hat on at that point, I was like, wow, you know, people have reported experiencing exactly this, seeing a weird creature and then an awful stench, and that's happening right now. So after I was satisfied that I couldn't figure out if there was anything out there in the woods, I decided to keep driving, and the smell stayed in the car or with me for a while, and I had to put all the windows down. It was pretty bad, and it finally dissipated, but that's really the crux of my sighting. But what's interesting is that in 1995 on that same road, there was a UFO encounter that occurred. Now, it was just a light in the sky that somebody saw, but it was a very intense experience for that witness. And on that same road, my father also saw some sort of weird entity / ghost thing that was about 10 feet tall. It had no head and no legs, and it glided behind this shed. He was walking with my mom on the road, and they saw that at like 4:30 in the morning. This was about 2 years ago when he saw that. So, you know, just on this road within like a 6-mile area, a few strange things have happened, you know, in the last 20 years.
Wow, it's strange. I wonder what the history behind that road would be, if there is one. You know?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot, but I will admit I haven't dug as deep as I could. But
the one question I do have before I get into what I think it is because of certain encounters that I've heard of, do you remember like the gait of this as it moved off? Was it fast? Was it kind of lumbering? I mean, that type. Do you remember?
I would say lumbering. It was, and I say stick figure because the limbs were really like spindly, you know, very thin, and so it took this exaggerated step, because in this rural area there's ditches on both sides, you know, before you get into the woods.
Yep.
And it took this exaggerated step over this ditch. And if it were 5 or 6 feet tall, an exaggerated step or a small jump would have to be accomplished. But it was much more smooth and slow, but it was an exaggerated step.
Was it bipedal?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, from the description that you were given and the smell, I don't know if this is extraterrestrial related or not, but the really strange thing is I have heard of this description of this type of creature, and the name given to it was the vomit because of the smell it has, and a lot of people who had encountered this thing up close had caused them to, well, vomit. So that was kind of like the nickname that was given to it. I haven't heard very much about it. But the strange thing about this is that generally a lot of the sightings, which I've heard very, very few until I had heard of yours, was that it was in the Louisiana, Mississippi type of area, which is to me like very telling. It's like, oh, okay, well, I mean, are these related? Because it's almost kind of like the same type of description that you had just given.
I think as soon as we get done here, I'm going to start researching the vomit.
Yeah, I had heard it on a story somebody had told to a narrator that I know of, somebody I used to listen to, and then I went kind of searching on Google. I don't know that I did a very good job, and I didn't find very much on it. But what little I did find seemed to have the same characteristics, and the smell was always the biggest telling feature of it, I guess you could say, is the best way I could put it.
Wow, really interesting.
So your CE5 event, you kind of self-generated this, did you?
I mean, I think so. I don't really know, and I don't really know how much I, buy into all of it. Not that I'm not open-minded to it. I mean, because of course I am. I just don't know until I try it or, talk to people that have done it or whatever. So I was on an investigation. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago now, 2016, 2017, something like that. And I was following up on an interview that I had done with a gentleman named Ken Putnam, who's down towards your way. I don't think he's as far south, but he's down there somewhere.
Okay.
And he had a lot of these really interesting experiences in the Casco and Naples area. And there was a mountain that he used to live on. And he had quite a few odd experiences there with seeing UFOs like in the daylight. So like a nuts and bolts object with jets chasing it. And he said that these UFOs, he would see them go up to the peak of the mountain and they would disappear, like they went behind this invisible curtain. And it convinced him, after he had experienced this for all these years, that there was some sort of portal at the peak of this mountain. So I was following up and going down there because I wanted to stake out the mountain to see if I could see what he was talking about. So I'm driving to the mountain, and I'm getting to it's a windy area, and GPS is half working, half not working. So I got turned around a few times, but I finally get to the road that's supposed to take me up to where I need to be and where I can park so I can have a good view of the peak area. And the road ended up being closed off. It was roped off, and there was a big sign there that said, "Smile, you're being filmed," which made no sense to me because it was all I just saw was trees and 2 poles and a chain. I'm like, where the hell's the camera? And I literally had to get out, and I was looking everywhere, and I didn't see one, but it seemed odd. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm trying to view these UFOs, and all of a sudden this road is roped off. I was kind of getting a little conspiracy brain there. But anyways, I decided to go to another area to see if I could view the peak from afar, because that's just as fine. So there's this place called Hackers Hill, and it's probably 5-6 miles away from the other entrance to this mountainous area. And Hackers Hill area is a really nice developed small hill, but it was far enough away that I could see the peak of several mountains from where I was, let alone the mountain that I actually wanted to watch. So now I'm parked up at Hackers Hill, and I had been there by this point 3-4 hours, and I'm a very patient dude, and I get the radio going. I'm just doing my thing and keeping my head on a swivel, just watching the skies. But I also got bored, so I'm standing out in front of my car, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try some CE5 stuff. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I just decide that in my head, I'm going to think, I'm going to kind of do a chant, like, show yourselves to me, reveal yourself to me. It's okay. I'm open to it. Show yourself to me, reveal yourself to me. Something like that. And I kind of repeated that in my head, closed my eyes, repeated that in my head for, a couple of minutes. And I opened my eyes and I'm looking at the mountain and there's nothing there. And I'm like, oh, great. That was a waste of time. So I just kind of turned to my left, and to my left is where it's an inlet for the ocean. And I look, and there's a light hovering in the sky above the ocean. It's a lot lower than the moon. It's actually probably 200, 300, 400 feet above the tree line. And it's hovering. It's not a plane. It wasn't the moon. It was a light. And I couldn't believe it. So I got back in my car, and that's where I had my cameras and things like that. And I immediately start recording it. And I started recording it for about 10, 15, 20 seconds. And then a vehicle showed up at Hackers Hill. And I was like, oh, crap, like, who are these people? I had gotten permission to be up there because it's a place that's usually closed at night. And to gain permission to be there, they actually had to leave the gate open. So maybe, some people happened by and they're like, oh, wow, the Hackers Hill thing is open tonight. Let's go up. And it turned out that it was, a few probably college kids smoking a little something because I could smell it. And but when I saw their headlights, I took my camera away. And once I figured out kind of what was going on with them, I'm like, okay, so I put my attention back to the water and get my camera out, and the object is gone. So I only got it on camera for 15, 20 seconds, and you can watch it on my YouTube video. It's not very compelling. It's just a light in the sky, but the whole context of it, of being there for the reason that I was there, and then to have the idea to do a CE5, and then did that work? And it revealed itself to me, but it was, behind me. It's not like I told it where to reveal itself, but that was the experience. Yeah, it was very interesting.
Well, it seems like it bore some type of fruit, which is promising.
Yeah.
So it's apparently that it's something like that it just takes practice, I guess. With some of the stuff that we were talking about before we actually started the show, with some of the stuff that were flying around in the skies here, I found myself, and my buddy is looking at me like I've got 3 heads, like, what are you doing? But I'm talking, I'm like, come on, show me something, pulse for me, do something for me a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you get a little bit of that, it's like, ooh, kind of supercharges you a little bit, Yeah,
it was exciting.
I wanted to change gears a little bit, if that's all right with you guys.
Of course.
Mike, you had mentioned something about ghosts before. One of the things that, as I was kind of researching so I could kind of come up with that little bit of an introduction, that you are a paranormal researcher. What are some of your experiences with that?
Well, some of them, I grew up in this household where nobody talked about UFOs. It wasn't until much later in life when I became very open with my stuff that I found out almost everybody in the family has had at least a sighting or some type of thing. So it was really funny that we all would talk about ghosts and not UFOs. My parents, my grandfather's house was haunted, almost like what we talked about before the show started. My grandfather and his grandmother lived in the downstairs, and his mother lived upstairs. And when she passed, nobody was up there, but everybody always heard her walking around, banging stuff. So, we grew up in this, ghosts are cool type situation. And we all had a big experience as a family when my grandfather died as well. So that kind of really piqued my interest. I mean, once I started doing it, we used a little air quotes professionally. I don't know what that means or doesn't mean. I've seen a little bit of everything. I've seen, orbs not on pictures, but, glowing balls of light with the naked eye, full body apparitions, shadow people. To me, the audio, the EVPs are the most compelling because they show some type of intelligence. But I mean, that's my opinion. Everybody's open to their own. But yeah, I've had a pretty good gamut of everything, and then I don't like to admit it a lot because the UFO stuff is enough to deal with.
Right.
If I'm eating right, sleeping right, treating my body right, and doing all that stuff, yeah, I'm a bit of a medium and an empath, but I usually try to do my best to bury that as deep as I can.
So if you're saying a bit of a medium and an empath, does that mean that if you are in a certain place or a certain area, your sensitivity is kind of heightened, like you kind of feel like that something is there, whether it be something from the skies or something more paranormal?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the weirdest things, I was just driving down the road one day, had the radio cranked up, just in a good mood, and all of a sudden I burst into tears, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? I wasn't sad, I was just, it was a good song, the one you turn up a little bit too much, and, put the pedal down a little faster than you should type thing, and, in a great mood, and I just burst into tears, and I got around this corner, and there's this funeral going on at this cemetery, and I'm like, that's not supposed to happen. I guess it explains it, but that's not supposed to happen. And so, that's a big example or an extreme example. But yeah, little things like that, and almost just growing up, if you refer back to the story where me and my cousin first saw this, my stuff seemed to be really more UFO-centric, in my opinion. But she started developing really good abilities. After that, she would be in my grandmother's house and just be alone in a room talking to somebody. And, my grandmother would come in and be like, who the hell are you talking to? There's nobody here. And she'd be like, oh, the old woman with the bad back. And she'd give enough description that people my grandmother would gasp and be like, holy shit, that's my mother. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this.
No, it's fine. Totally fine, yeah.
And things like that. And, she had some stuff that was, maybe it was UFO, maybe it was the other, but she remembers seeing the Statue of Liberty from above, and she'd never been on a plane. I was with her the first time she was on a plane, because we were all flying down to Florida together and got to actually see that view. But she had that memory of that from way before then. So my stuff was more UFO stuff, but she her psychic abilities really developed, or at least she acknowledged them and let them develop. Is probably a better way to put it. And I think it all kind of ties in a weird way. If you talk to most experiencers, where any communication between you and them is telepathically, I think once that part of your brain's opened up, I think you're opened up to communicate with a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily have to be, extraterrestrial.
Well, you mentioned your cousin just now. Is there anybody else in your family that kind of is sensitive or asensitive like that?
One of a different cousin's kid, at a very early age, they were 2 or 3, they were just getting to that talking stage, and they're talking to somebody who's not here, and we're he's not just looking in the corner and babbling and entertaining himself. They're he's having a real conversation. Everybody in the family's call Mike, and because they know I was open to that sort of thing. But yeah, no, we grew up ghosts are normal. We all believe this. We've all seen it enough. We don't have to prove it. That big thing. We think my grandfather was involved in this UFO stuff too, and never said anything because of a lot of reasons, and most of it's in the book. But around when he died, there were so many things that happened. His house was historic. Not like the George Washington, but just everybody in the family knew there were ghosts there type thing, and it was just this weird culture imbalance between why do we talk about the ghost stuff and not the UFO stuff? And then once I came forward with my UFO stuff, it's my parents recall their sighting. My great uncles actually kicked out of private school here in New Hampshire, up in Wolfboro in the 60s, proclaiming he was abducted by aliens. The school said it was a mental issue or drugs. Either way, they weren't equipped to handle it. And the list just goes on, and all these stories came out of the woodwork, and it was like, what the blank? I grew up my whole life alone, and all you were like, yeah, it's been all of us. But now you decide to tell me, it was a weird dynamic.
Well, it almost in a way seems generational. Could this in some way be a reason why you've had the experiences that you've had? You know what I'm saying? It's if you're seeing this kind of like this pattern of like a family history. It's almost like, wow, that's kind of mind blowing for me anyway. It's like giving me goosebumps and stuff, man. Holy, wow. So it also kind of makes me wonder, your personal opinion, I guess, how much of what all of you guys were experiencing is ET or paranormal, or are the two really kind of mixing together in a way that they seem separate but aren't? It's almost kind of like in some weird way they've always got eyes on you. I don't mean to freak you out or anything like that, but...
Oh, no, you didn't freak me out at all. Where do you draw the line, and where's it separated, and where's safe? I don't know, but I almost look at, when it comes to the extraterrestrial stuff, there's definitely physical components to it. There's real craft, there's real beings that you could feel, touch, but there's also this, for lack of a better term, like ethereal or, spiritual component to them, too. And I actually think, like, as most people, if they believe in spirit guides, I look at extraterrestrials the same way. I think they're with us all the time, even though you can't see them, feel them, or whatever. Like, I don't know that they're the same, but they can operate on the same plane.
Wow. I've kind of thought that a little bit myself, but it's such an open-ended subject. We've got so many more questions than we do answers in that type of situation. Man, that's something else. So,
and I think the hardest part is, I don't know if we're even capable of understanding the answer. I don't know if we're actually capable of understanding the question. So, it gets tricky, and that's really why I've gone to the people not proof perspective, because, since modern day ufology, 1947 Roswell, we're still arguing whether these things exist or don't exist. And you've got this slew of people, just caught in the middle. It's like people being trapped in a burning building, and you're trying to figure out how the fire started. Like, no, that doesn't matter. Get these people out of the building, We can figure out the rest later, or maybe we'll never figure it out. But you got to help the people who are involved first.
Yeah, and that's what I like about how your philosophy with how you approach this entire subject is not only the fact that you've experienced some just really, wow. It's for me personally, it's not like a CE 4 or 5 or it's like a CE holy shit. You know what I mean? And, for me, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, there's no way I don't think that any of us could really understand an entire like nuts and bolts type of thing, considering where our technology is nowadays. I think we're a very young race. If you've got these beings that have this type of technology that can do the things that they do, well, not only would they be advanced technological wise, but it would only be logical to think that they would be highly advanced biologically too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Oh
no, go right ahead, my friend. Go right ahead.
Well, and I think the bigger part, and hopefully we didn't mean to, but it ended up being what the book was really about, was, an experiencer is not just an experiencer when they see a light in the sky, when they're having an abduction. They have to get through this regular mundane life and the trauma that causes. And, somewhere along the lines, when he approached me with this idea, and it was like, all right, I'm going to tell him everything that's happened. He's going to write it down. He's going to put his own little spin, opinions in it, blah, 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 whatever. And it's going to be the standard UFO book, which, for anybody who's written one, I'm not dogging them. Everybody loves that. They want the gore and the, like, oh, what happened? What's the, give us the excitement type thing. And somewhere, the UFO stuff is what keeps the pages turning. But the book becomes less of a UFO book and more of a humanity book, about just the human side of it, not the extraterrestrial side of it. And I think that, Nomar alluded to it a little bit earlier, and that's where we're really bonded, and not because, like you said, we're best of friends or something, but through this process of writing this book, we became like war buddies because we both experienced the same thing, like going through this book. We had to make hard choices. The publisher accepted it. We had to walk away, and we were always on the same page, without even asking each other. It was an amazing process in and of itself.
Well, that's actually a beautiful statement right there, because you can take an amazing story like what you have and the experiences that Nomar's had, but if you can't relate to it, if you can't factor in the human factor, then it kind of just becomes an ordinary type of thing. And I hate to say it like that, but I think that's what the beautiful thing is. And getting from this conversation that we've been having tonight is that you really focus on the people, and the best way to be able to relate to something like that and to really, just care about a person and what they've been going through is to relate that. Say, hey, listen, man, I've seen this and I've been through that, but this is like killing me inside, type of thing. And until you really put that to the forefront, either way, I'm really excited to read the book. So come payday, I'm going to be heading right over to your website, Nomar, and I'm going to be getting myself a copy, because it's
awesome.
It's just, we can only say so much in a conversation like this. But if you really want to get into the real deep issue of it, the relatable issue, is to actually read the book. And that's what I would push for anybody who's listening to this. We're going to have all the links, and come the end here, I'm going to make sure that you got, people know how to get a hold of you guys. So if anybody happens to be listening to something like this and they've had this type of experience, maybe they can get a hold of you. You know what I mean? Maybe they can talk to you and be able to open up and just kind of really alleviate some of that pressure. It's like a big 800-pound monkey on your shoulder type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, and use it as a turn of phrase, and I'll let Nomar handle it, because he can probably do it better than I can, or at least without breaking down, but use the phrase, "This is killing me inside." And why don't you take that away, Nomar?
Yes, please. Yes.
Well, some of this, all right. I think the best way...
Sorry, I did throw you under the bus there.
No, it's okay. I think the best way that I feel that I can help, because Mike helps people and experiencers in a different way than I do. When I'm working on a project, I'm worried about the content creation, and if it's, relatable, if it's engaging, is it just generally good? There's this whole creative aspect that I'm really just ensconced in, and so the way I feel that I help people is a little bit different, where if there is someone sitting at home that is like Mike, but hasn't taken even that first step yet, so they're sitting there with all of this internal turmoil, and they're suffering from depression. They may be hours or days away from self-harm, or they're a lifetime of being alone. Hopefully, in reading or watching something that I have made will help them to understand that they're not alone. And just that little sliver of hope, or that there is somebody out there with the potential to understand, is a really big deal for someone who suffers, almost any sort of trauma. Just to know you're not alone, just to know that somebody else is feeling what you feel, it's a very big deal for people like us. And if I can be a contributor in something positive to somebody's life who's suffering like that, I mean, it's a privilege. It's amazing. And Mike and I have received, both separately and together, some really great feedback about the book, just from everyday readers, and that's really, really, simply made us feel good. We're just really happy that people are getting what this book is about. And yeah. I think that's my big old statement.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's not, the feedback's not coming from parts of the book where we thought it would. We're not getting the, oh, that was an amazing story, like I hate to call it this because most of our people, like, they have an interest in the subject, probably personally, that's why they read the book, but we're not getting that fanboy response. To me, it's like, yeah, this happened, this is like, I don't want to share this, but, like, if you're going to do this, we got to do it right, you got to know this part, and it's that shit I didn't want to put in the book, and again, sorry.
No worries, my friend.
That people are responding to more so than the Hollywood part of it, like the gore and the ooh and the ah stories. They're like, yeah, whatever. Like we can get that anywhere. They're like, no, and it's funny. Like some of the stupidest stuff. Like I don't even know if that should be in there. Is that just filler or this or that? That's the stuff people are connecting to and reaching out to me personally about. They're like, yeah, that happened too. And it's like the problem with ufology and this whole thing is we cookie cuttered it. It's like this is what an abduction is, and it's like no, or maybe that is what an abduction is, but that's not what being an experiencer is. And I thought Nomar was gonna say it, but he didn't. So I will kind of say it, but I won't talk too much about it just because it's hard. The crux of the book, in a way, is my own. I was ready to commit suicide. I couldn't handle this stuff anymore. And, how I got through it and how it's all related and all that's in the book. I won't give away too much. But, yeah, no, this got really personal for both of us.
Yeah, and the for lack of a better term, the gory details of what led to that decision and what ultimately happened after that decision was made. It's just all of it is in there. And even when I read it, and this, listen, I'm an idiot. I know I'm not the best writer in the world, but when I read that portion of the book myself, I still get goosebumps. I still get a lump in my throat because what you're reading at that point is the rawness of a man who had had enough, who had given up. And there's actual hope on the other side of it. And to go back to what I was saying earlier, when somebody is suffering like that, who hasn't shared yet, or has shared very little, that's a big deal to read that about somebody else. And hopefully it can help them and know that there is some sort of hope out there,
Well, I do have to say, and this is my own personal opinion, but I think that both of you gentlemen are a couple of absolute warriors, because a lot of what we've talked about tonight has obviously been difficult. And even though I know that you've both been very open about sharing your experiences, that doesn't make it any less hard. So, from the bottom of my heart, I say thank you very much, not only for, sharing what you've shared, but for your strength and being just as brave as you could possibly be and being as open as you could possibly be. And that, for me, I truly appreciate that. And I think that a lot of my listeners and whoever may stumble upon this will think the same way, because like I said, and it comes with me in writing fiction and whatnot, you can have the best story in the world, but if you can't make your characters human and relatable, then you don't have anything.
Well, let me start off by saying those are incredibly kind words, and I most certainly appreciate them. And I don't want to speak for but I don't.
No, you're doing fine so far, man.
I definitely don't feel brave. I don't think I have a lot of strength. And what I do know, though, or there are very few things that I know I'm good at. And of those very few things, one of them is to know, it's kind of hard, is to know when enough is enough. I know that's kind of out of context, but
makes sense.
Strength has been an insecurity throughout my entire life, and bravery has been an insecurity throughout my entire life. And to be able to convey a sense of bravery to someone like you or someone who might be listening through my words, I mean, that just makes all of it worth it. You know what I'm saying? Because like, I know who I am as a person, and a lot of times it's not brave, it's not strong, it's just trying to get the words out. And you got those words tonight, and that's just really cool in my book.
Well, I know that, you know, this is the first time that we've actually talked, you know, a little bit before we started the show, but you guys, sure. You're like a couple of brothers to me, and I really don't even know you that well, but I feel like in the short time that we've been able to have this conversation, you guys are a couple of rocks, man, and I look up to something like that, and that's very impressive for me, definitely.
Well, appreciate it, man.
Nomar, Mike, let's throw it out there. How can people find the book? Where can they get the book? How can they get a hold of you at Granite Sky? Take the stage, my friends.
You want to start off, Mike?
Yeah, sure. So, you can find me at graniteskies.org. My email's on there, or there's a message option, which just emails me anyway. So either or, whatever is easiest for you. And then just looking at the Granite Sky Services on Facebook. The website, it's pretty stagnant. It has all the basic information, but I don't try to update it with like, oh, this is when the meeting's happening, this is when the meetings happen. So, if you're local and you want to come to a meeting, definitely click on the Facebook. But yeah, that's basically the best way to reach me.
Okay.
To get the book, it's available on Amazon and Kindle. You can also get it in Southern Maine at the Green Hand Bookshop in Portland, Maine. And I also sell signed copies on my own web store. And all of that information and links can be found at allmylinks.com/Slevik. Slevik. Or just Google Granite Skies and it's going to come up.
You also have a podcast, don't you?
I do. It's called I Want to Believe podcast. Season 4 is just about to launch in January of 2021. It's a podcast just sharing spooky real-life stories, and it ranges from UFOs to black-eyed kids, everything in between, witches, just whatever. And there is a fresh new episode out right now. I do holiday specials, so there is a Halloween special out there right now. So in your podcast apps, you can search for I Want to Believe or Nomar Slevik, and my podcast will come up.
Yeah, and I actually listened to quite a few of your episodes of your podcast today. And
cool,
very, very enjoyable, very entertaining, man. So you got a great thing going. And eventually, because you're talking about spooky stuff and black-eyed kids, and there's a whole lot of other stuff that we didn't cover, and I know you guys are right down on that. So I'm going to want you to come back here in the near future. If you guys are up for it, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely be open to that. And I also want to throw out, because Nomar's too shy, dude, that you can find it on that All My link he just gave out. He is the ultimate creator. He also does music, and he made a soundtrack to the book, music inspired by Granite Sky. So there's this whole album out there about, like, abduction type music. I personally, it's not really my genre, but I like it. He did a great job, so check that out too.
A music man too. Is there nothing that you can't do, Mr. Nomar?
There's plenty, my friend.
Well, I'm definitely going to get right on top of that, because now I'm going to definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, sure. If anybody wants to check it out, it's nomarslevik.bandcamp.com, or just go to bandcamp.com and type in my name, and my page will come up. And there's a soundtrack. It's like 17 songs or something, and Mike even makes a little cameo on there, so that's pretty cool.
Nice. Well, all of those links will definitely be in the description, and if you could email me those links, that would definitely help me out a whole lot. Gentlemen, I truly, truly appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time. And I know that my listeners will truly appreciate this as well. Fantastic discussion, man. You guys blew my mind tonight. And I know I was a little nervous at first, but you really helped me be able to get into the groove, and I just truly appreciate it.
Well, thanks, man. You did a great job, too. Thank you.
Thank you,
yeah,
sir.
No, thank you for having us. And it's funny because, I remember when I first started getting into this field, and you have to ask people, like, oh, will you do this, will you do that? And you're like, oh, God, am I even in a position to ask them? And, you should see us through most shows. You're just so down to earth. It's just so natural. I don't think we had to do it. But normally most shows where our anxiety is so bad, we're talking to the host and we're texting or messaging each other going is this going good? Is this going bad? I said that. Am I talking too much? Yeah, we're horrible people, in the best of ways, but we have no self-confidence, really.
Well, you should, because you guys killed it tonight. I really, truly believe that. And hey, this is a new thing for me too. I originally was a narrator on YouTube, and, now I've converted to the podcast type of format. And, I'm just kind of trying to do my own thing. And, when I was listening to some of the shows you guys were on earlier, I could tell how uncomfortable in certain situations you guys were. And I could only think that, oh, my goodness, how can I make it so it won't be like that tonight? So, I'd like to think it was mission accomplished, because you guys were awesome. And sure. I think everybody loosened up really good. And I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. It was very good. It was really good. Thank you.
I totally appreciate it. Thank you, Nocturnals, for taking the time to stop and listen to the show. I truly appreciate that, and I appreciate you. A very special thank you to our guests for entertaining us and telling us their stories and sharing their wisdom. Until the next time, Nocturnals, I will see you in the next show. Good night, everybody.